Set up. My name is Kenneth. Cannot speak that loud today. I've been sick for a couple of days. Now it's only in my voice, but come nearer, or else it's recorded so you can watch it at home. Yeah, I'm going to talk about type safety in front-end code, and it's a topic that I like, and it's a topic that I spent some time pushing at different companies. One of them, Issue, which I've been working at for a while, Unity a short while, and right now I'm at Leo Innovation Lab. So I gave this talk the other day for some of my colleagues in there that haven't used JavaScript for a while. But I think it still makes sense just to recap where we are right now. You probably remember this book on the right. If you don't, it's actually a really nice book. It's a couple of years old at a time where, and still, JavaScript's still big, and it took a few days to build and stuff like that. We all remember that story. But what I actually want to say here is that a lot has happened since the Good Parts book here. It's actually, I think it's growing. The language is actually pretty rapidly evolving. So there's almost a new version or standard out every year that browser vendors are fairly quick to adopt, and when they're not quick enough, we got Babel to help us compile or transpile. They actually changed the wording here. They're also in doubt what to use, but basically using newest JavaScript and then being able to run it in legacy browsers. So that's nice. So I think that the language is evolving. At the same time, I think also the complexity is evolving a lot. We're building super complex single-page applications. We're building native apps with, for example, React Native. We're building desktop apps like the Slack app, Node apps, Node backends. So I think complexity is also rising at the same time as the language is evolving. So I think for me, this talk is about these code bases that we cannot really keep in our mind, and we cannot really comprehend what it's about. And maybe there are multiple developers working on it. So that's why I looking into if static type checking can help us. And you might wonder if you haven't worked with static type checking, or if you haven't worked with a language like Java. It's type safety is basically in which extent a programming language is able to prevent type errors or discourage type errors. That's like the broad Wikipedia definition. So I think for me, as spending some time in JavaScript for a while, one of the actually excellent gateway drugs for me was prop types in React. So I'm not sure. I guess a lot of you are using React and maybe are using prop types, which basically is runtime type checks for you. So that's nice. But what if we could enforce those compile time instead? That's kind of the idea. So a static type checker for me would be something that captures errors compile time. It would give me smarter tooling like auto-completions in my editors. So instead of state.user.token or token ID or whatever you cannot remember and you need to look it up, that would be able to help you here. And thereby also making refactoring less scary, moving things around. That would be nice. And also documenting all the types that you already have in your system, because you have types all over, although it's a dynamic language. So you just start documenting them and saying this is actually a string, or this is an array of users, or whatever. So that's kind of what I'm looking for when I'm looking for a type checker. And the big thing here is these compile time errors instead of runtime errors. So you're all convinced, seems? So let's just dive right into it. I think the first option to consider is one of the oldest, is TypeScript. The fathers being a famous Dane, also father of C# and Turbo-Pascal, if I remember right. It's basically a superset of JavaScript, and it was at the time where we maybe actually before Babel, right? So at a time where they were looking at the future versions of JavaScript and actually built that into the language, including enums, class interfaces, stuff like that. It tries to be all or nothing. Both a compiler, a type checker, a bundler. You can opt out of all these features, but that's That's one of the selling points. And I've tried to note it for each of these languages that I'm talking about here, some popular users. Of course, there's a lot of companies using TypeScript, but one of the more popular open source ones is all the Angular 2 projects that you would see if you start an Angular 2 project, you're writing in TypeScript. Yeah. So another option, Flow, is like Facebook's TypeScript-like annotations for JavaScript, more opt-in, so it's more per file. You would say, I actually want some types here. And it's only a powerful type checker. You use whatever tool you used to use for compiling, bundling, stuff like that. Facebook is using it a lot, promoting it a lot. I think one of the reasons they said was that TypeScript was too slow for their code base. I don't think any of us have that luxury. But anyway, so if you're using tools from Facebook, Flow is probably a good option for you. So let's just see some examples here. So I have written some plain good old JavaScript. There's 2 errors in this one. One of them can be captured runtime, and the other one is not captured due to the dynamic nature of JavaScript. So the actual error that is captured runtime is that I misspelled body. And the other error is kind of an error. There's no type safety around concatenating a string with an array here, which is not what I want, but JavaScript is forgiving. And you spotted also that there's some error down here. Yeah, I started with a small t in HTML, but actually you can write HTML with a small l in Chrome. That was my first thing, and that worked. So I was like, oh. But that's a common misspell. So that's another way of fixing these type errors, just make everything work. But that's like my main example, and I've used it all over. So it's simple function, concatenating a string, putting something on the body. So it's DOM interaction and it's simple function. Okay. So in TypeScript, you will see the only real difference here is that there would be a small annotation with string. And now we'll get these 2 errors actually compile time. So when we just run the TypeScript compiler, we would get these 2 errors. So that's nice. Now we get these compile time errors that I was talking about. And for Flow, Flow is a bit more clever. So you don't really need the string. Unless if you're exporting the function, because then it might be not able to infer the type. But here's actually able to infer the type. The output is a bit more verbose, but tries to be helpful. So that's cool. We get these compile time errors. That's nice. And another really important property for me with these 2, if you choose Flow or TypeScript, is that compiling it for TypeScript or running Babel just removes the type declarations, and the output is really easy to debug. I'll come a bit back to this, but this is a really important property also in terms of exit strategy, actually moving away from Flow or TypeScript, that you can actually just compile it and there you have your plain old JavaScript. That's nice. But some might answer or ask the question, is JavaScript plus some types really the answer here? And a lot of people have investigated that, just building a whole new language like PureScript or Elm, where we can avoid some of these errors. Or maybe just because you know Scala already, or Clojure, or OCaml, then why not write it in OCaml? So that's what Facebook is doing. So there's a lot of terminology around this, and it was only when I did this slide that I actually realized what all the different tools were, so I'll try to explain it. So Reason is basically a syntax and toolchain on top of OCaml that makes the syntax a bit more user-friendly. OCaml you might know, a nice language. And then BuckleScript, which is basically a compiler to OCaml to really fast and simple JavaScript, which is very readable. It's very early stages, but Facebook is promoting it. You'll see some talks around this, and Messenger.com is set to be 30% Reason and BuckleScript. That's interesting. Another one that you might have heard of, Elm, purely functional. The interesting thing with Elm is that it's a domain-specific standard library for building actual web applications. So instead of having this document.body.inner.html, there's a virtual DOM. That's the only thing you can use. You cannot call document.body. So it tries to fix some of these errors. And I would say super friendly tooling ecosystem, nice. Popular users, not that many. A lot of small companies, but not like Facebook or Microsoft. So first reason on BubbleScript, I managed to do the greeter function super easy. I wasn't able to really interact with the DOM, and that's really what I wanted here. There's nice findings for React, so I could have done a not huge React application around this. That's not really what I wanted. I want to show that you can actually interact with the DOM. I didn't get it to work. Elm, my first lines of Elm, 2 minutes, super nice, easy tooling. Pretty standard. And the actually compiler helped me a lot writing this code. That's nice. But you would see here, there's no document.body interaction. So we have some languages here that looks nothing like JavaScript, which I guess is nice if that's really what we wanted. But it's not easy to debug the output, and it's really hard to. We don't have an extra strategy anymore. We cannot just compile the code and then we have JavaScript. We can check into our repository. So if you go down this route, then you need to know what you're doing. But Elm is super fun. I really like it, and for small projects, definitely try it out. But you get an output that looks like this. So you really need to trust that the runtime is working. And same thing for Scala.js that I also tried for another presentation. But you get compile time errors, which is nice. So, silver bullet? Yeah, no. So introducing these types requires tears and blood and time. But it's trade-offs, right? It's around if you want your code to be very easily hackable, super easy to change stuff, also easy to break, or make it more rigid and safe. So it's a trade-off. But I think it pays off for systems of a certain complexity and size, and maybe if there's multiple contributors, or yeah, depends a bit on the project. So you might ask, what should I actually bet on? You introduced a lot of different things, and what would you prefer? So I would definitely say for most projects, Flow and TypeScript is nice. It's super easy to add on top of your existing code base. You can always remove it again. Easy to exit. Flow is easier to exit because it's opt-in per file. TypeScript is a bit harder to get out of, but it's doable. And if you're in for something fun, try Elm for your next pet project. It's really nice. And probably Reason will be there at one point, and BubbleScript will be there at one point. This is a big one. It's getting there. Yeah, I just tried to be a bit friendly here. One thing with Elm is that you need to, if it's a Node project or if it's a React Native project, you cannot write it in Elm. It's this DSL for writing web pages. So it depends a bit on where you are in your project. And then a few tips of those of you who are working with React and Redux. So if you're working with Redux, if you're not, then this is just black magic. But you will have different reducers here in this application. This is actually the document page of issue, or parts of it, at least how it looked yesterday. So you will have some config state, there's a document state, publisher state, and user state. And for each of these, in order to add either TypeScript or Flow, this is Flow, you would add types to each of these. And so, for example, here's a user reducer. This is just something I made up. But for the user reducer, there might be an initial state with a token and a user ID, and then it takes an action. This is just plain Redux. What we would like here is that maybe the action doesn't have an ID, maybe it has a user ID. That's the type safety we would like to have. So in order to get that, it's about adding some extra lines of code which annotates what the state is actually, and what the actions are. So that's the work you need to do in order for your reducers to work. And there's a lot more than that, but Anders will talk about that, I think. Maybe. For React, the prop types example we saw before, I have one recommendation, and that's this code mod. So if you have an existing code base and you think, let me just try out Flow for the fun, then run this code mod prop types to Flow. It transforms your existing source code, ooh, nice, into something that looks like this. And you just check that in, and you'll see Flow actually comes up with compile time errors like you're actually using this greeter with an array. So that's nice. That's what I have. Any questions?
It seems like you chose Flow. Why did you choose Flow?
I like that. Just add a annotation on top of your file and move. Yeah, just.
And it's the same for TypeScript. You just change the extended from there to TS. You don't need that anymore. You don't even need that anymore.
There are some. Okay, I tried it a couple of months ago where it didn't really work for me. Also because we're using async await in the project, and that just got into TypeScript recently. So I think there's a huge buy-in if you choose TypeScript, or there's a larger buy-in. That's not a huge buy-in, but there's a larger buy-in because they need to support the features that we're using also. So for me, it wasn't as easy just to add it to the existing project because we're maybe using language features that they haven't implemented. But I would go for both of them. Just try it out. It's, as you say, it's not a big deal changing. Although you need to change the file name if you do. Yeah, actually another thing that annoyed me a bit with TypeScript was the linter. The linter is not as good, I would say, as ESLint. It gets a lot more error cases, but there's a new parser for ESLint, so that's nice.
Apparently, Microsoft is working on a new linter for now.
Yeah, but the good thing is that actually ESLint now supports TypeScript. Due to Prettier, a lot of work that has been done there with Prettier, actually, they've been extending the parser. So now you can use ESLint. So you can choose both of them. It's all good. Other questions? Or comments? Maybe you tried these tools and didn't like them, or? That's the blood and tears part. You spend some time, and you especially spend some time in the beginning where you don't know how it works. And that's one of the other reasons why I would choose Flow if I'm in a React or React Native application, because you can find a lot of blog posts and quirks that you can get around by reading about it. And I'm sure if you're building an Angular project, it makes a lot of sense to use TypeScript instead. But it's early stages, and you sometimes you just fight with the types, and that's where I like just to opt out sometimes. Just say no, not for this part. It works, or I'll write more tests for this part. No, this time.
Yeah, you seem to a bit dismiss Elm, saying that it's for pet projects.
No.
And it seems like a lot of people that get in Elm, they are like ecstatic about it. Like they say it's a totally different world, and like all companies switch to it, right? Why do you have that idea that it's maybe not suitable for companies to switch to it?
So from my own experience, it was super nice. The times that I tried it, it has been nice. So I like the whole ecosystem. I'm just a bit worried that not a lot of big companies are doing it yet, at least open source. But by all means, go for it. But the exit strategy is not really there. So if you go for it, then at least have a few developers that are really passionate about it. Actually, Evan, the creator, did a really nice blog post around if you're choosing Elm at your company, how to get it in there. So if you want to try a fun language, then read that blog post. It's actually quite interesting, having somebody that can advocate for language, because it is a really nice experience. Like, it took me 2 minutes, although I had never written anything on that. So yeah, but I wouldn't do it for the projects that I'm working on, because it's React and it's React Native, and it's maybe a huge code base that I wouldn't rewrite. But for a new project, maybe I would try it out. Other questions? That's just comment button. Cool. Thanks.